It's all yours.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Ben here.
I'm Scott.
I'm Jenna.
And that was an unscripted intro at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of America. Good to see you. By you can tell by the title of this live session, this is a new concept we're doing. And anytime we do something new, we talk like this and get really excited. But welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday night, Whiskey Wednesday, as they say. Do they still say that?
I think so. Yeah.
We were just talking about how old we're getting and how things are actually not relevant anymore. And so maybe Whiskey Wednesday's not a thing. But
well, you two talked about how old you were getting, and then I had to remind you how old I am. So.
I know we're half your age, Scott. But the point is that right. But the point, yeah, you've been sort of in this. You've solidified your state of being to be just this cool cat, like this ageless cool cat who's got this perfect complexion and like the silver fox thing. I'm losing it. I'm losing my mind here too. But welcome. This will be a fun night tonight. First of many to come, as we hope. And as you can tell by the title of this video, I should say this live video, this is going to be our first Whiskey Roundtable discussion. Discussion seems like a serious word. It's more of like an open conversation. Right? I mean, is it?
Yeah.
I don't think
we kind of wanted to do something when we do the outturn preview tastings and the mid-month outturn preview tastings. We have this core group of people that tune in, a lot of the time, and they come sometimes not to just watch the OPT or the mid-month OPT. They come to talk to each other in this little community that's formed, just in the chat itself. And so this was kind of one of those ways for us to kind of more often be able to bring the community back together, but then also where we're not, in a sales pitch where we don't have product, that we're advertising and tasting and doing things like that, where we can just talk about whiskey and have a general discussion and have everybody, help out and tune in and give their thoughts and opinions as well.
Yeah. And too, I think we have these conversations amongst us, like the three of us often. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of nice that we're able to now bring that and include everyone else, where it's not just us, rattling back and forth and talking nonsense on, all these whiskey things. We can now do it with, everyone.
Yeah. So this is going to be a pilot. I've always wanted to do a pilot, like a pilot of a series. We plan on doing this and just building on what Scott and Jenna just shared. We want this to make this like an opportunity to learn about things. I feel like the three of us are in this unique position because we were all independent whiskey content creators before we joined this company, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of America. And I don't know, I feel like we were already actively researching whiskey, exploring them, tasting so many whiskeys, formulating our own opinions. But then inevitably, when you go on this other side of the aisle, like, I don't know, the amount of perspective you get is it's significant in my opinion. For me, it's changed a lot of my understanding of things. So I kind of was thinking, going back to what it's like to just be an enthusiast and not really know. There's some benefits to that, the romance is, I would say, much more prominent, but there's also so much more to learn that I think, man, if I just really understood some things the way they are, from like the insider perspective, it'd be amazing. So, hopefully that'll come out in our conversation. We want that to come out, be fully transparent with the way the industry works from our perspective. And of course, the three of us have different experiences up to this point too. So hopefully we all have something to share. Is that pretty much it, right? I think we'll get in some little debates. I think that's probably in the works.
Yeah, sure.
And, and as you can tell, let's just talk about the topics for tonight. So tonight we're going to talk about really two core topics. And I think knowing three of us, mostly myself, there will be a tangent or two, and tangents, we're not going to be afraid of those in this night. Usually we try to avoid those. Okay, so what we're talking about tonight, first topic of discussion will be, first of all, the almighty sherry cask. And the big question some of us have, is it overrated? Is the sherry cask overrated? I feel, okay, Scott's already sharing his opinion. I feel like the sherry cask, everybody loves it. Everybody goes all romantic with the sherry cask. Jenna gets the feels. I sometimes say, oh man, Scott thinks he's like lushy sounds. Anyway, but we're going to really take a deep dive in the sherry cask tonight and talk about its role in the Scotch whiskey industry and Scotch whiskey production and appreciation, and talk about that. So beyond that, we're going to really take a deep dive into the single cask. And I think obviously we're in this biased position, being from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, in which we highly favor the single cask style of whiskey. But I think we want to really address what that really looks like and talk about single cask in comparison to other styles, mainly single malt and blend. Because I think as we've been discussing this just before we went live, there's a lot to be considered. Anyway, it was just like we really liked the conversation that we were having. So actually we started talking about this a week or so ago.
Yeah.
And we just said, let's just save this for the live stream. So yeah, that's it. It's just three of us tonight. I think moving forward, we're gonna have some guests on, which will be pretty exciting, and they'll come to us, or come to you rather, and bring a lot of insight, a lot of knowledge, a lot of key learnings about whiskey. But mostly, we're just gonna have a good time. So, by obligation, I must say, Jenna, what's in your glass tonight?
Well, I couldn't decide, so I poured two. Before we came on, we were talking about some of the older whiskeys that we've kind of been hanging on to over the years. So I pulled cask 35.245, a conversation piece off the shelf. And we discovered this was in Chenin Blanc for 13 years. And then a custom, I believe it's like number 4 char, toasted heads, second fill barrel. And then I poured a little bit of 37.136 bar nibbles. Really like this whiskey a lot. So I have both of them poured. What about you, Ben? What's in your glass?
How about you, Scott? I'm gonna. I've got two in front of me, and I have to make one. I got one glass though, so I'm not as. Scott, what do you?
I can only guess that Scott has like a first fill ex bourbon Speyside 8-year-old.
Bad cop.
No.
Negative Ghost Rider.
Man.
Dystopian Deviant 24.162 is in my glass right now. 13-year-old, of course. Exclusive sherry maturation. 62.9%. Couple different, two double cask, but exclusive sherry. I got a couple backups here. Next, I'm going to move on to, I probably should have done this one first, but this was a Juicy Oak and Vanilla 80.31 in Super Bowl enjoyment, but finished in Oloroso. So this one a little bit more, I went for be able to talk about that second maturation, just to finish, in Oloroso, where you just get some hints of it and not quite that deep, dark palate hit. And then follow up with a 53.391 Dark Secrets.
Oh, God,
bro, are you thirsty? This is like this is like the State of Collection tour.
Double maturation, the second cask being an Oloroso barrel.
I have that one. That was that.
That was a stunner.
Yeah.
Wait, can you show that label? Do you mind? Can you hold that to the camera? I don't think I.
Oh, if it'll.
Yeah.
Dark. It's that whiskey.
It's just fixated on your. Oh. Yeah. That was a good one. When did that one come out? I'm trying to remember.
Maybe like September
last year.
Yeah.
Not that long ago. Just sorry, everyone catching up on chat. Shout out to Zach Kemble, who says hello, friends.
Zach.
Well, everybody give Zach some shit. He's left the SMWS, but just kidding. He's obviously here, and he's still a friend, and we still love Zach. Zach, glad you made it tonight. Reach into the old society cabinet. I know you got one. It looks just like Jenna's. So good to see you, Zach. And who else we have? Eric. Wait. Oh, coming from Eric saying sherry cask is my safety word. Okay. Interesting to see what this means exactly, Eric. We're about to jump in that conversation. And George G Cap.
I was just getting ready to show that one, if that was the same one you were going for.
Yes, I want to know when another one of this will be coming a conversation. Oh man, the conversation piece. George. Yeah, when Jenna pulled that out, I was saying that was one of a whiskey from a few years ago, and
fantastic.
I got an extra bottle for myself because I was just in love with it. Drew Bills says, super excited to see this tonight. Great people with great knowledge. Drew, I was just thinking about you. I was listening to Pink Floyd and thinking about when we were up in Indy rocking out and trying to keep up with your 80s keyboard. That was amazing. So in my glass, I just, I had to switch teams for a minute because I was going in a direction and I thought this would be relevant to our conversation. I went with 19.65 50s nostalgia. I don't know if you can see that. 18-year-old Highland first fill ex-bourbon barrel. Just a naked whiskey, no crazy casks, just a barrel, 57.5%. I just poured a little bit because I'm going to taste a few as well. So yeah, that's the question. Just to start off with this, let's talk about the sherry cask. And as we talk about this, I guess our promise to you, everybody in chat, we're going to be totally raw and unfiltered with our opinions. The good thing about being part of the SMWS is we don't really have to say that we like things that we don't like. That's just the nature of it. We see whiskeys from all different walks of life, it seems like these days. And let's talk about the sherry cask though, because I feel like for the three of us, and I want to, maybe we start with you, Scott, because I can just see the sweat glands in full force right now,
beating out of his pores.
Let's talk about the sherry cask style, and just for everybody, if I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about, but Scotch whiskey, by law is aged in oak, and that can be any type of oak, and oftentimes, not the most common anymore, but often whiskey is aged in casks that previously held sherry wine. Sherry is a fortified wine from Spain, southern Spain, and it's all different types of sherry. It's like so when we say sherry, it can really mean anything. There's the flavor spectrum is as diverse as all of wine itself, like from dry, crisp, and bright Fino sherries to deep, rich, and dark Pedro Jimenez sherries. Usually when you see sherry casks, in Scotch whiskey, it's Oloroso sherry, which is kind of on the heavier side. Think about like the dark fruits, spice notes, the nutty characteristics that a lot of people love. So, I've just, in my experience, people are very divided on the sherry cask, and I find a lot of people who love the style and other people who swear against it. And not that I think maybe some of us have opinions on either side of the aisle, but I think I'd like to hear from you. Maybe you start, Scott, your opinion of the sherry cask, because I've always identified you as the sherry guy even before we met in person.
So before I even get started, I want you guys to think real quick, both of you and everybody watching. Think of your top 3 whiskeys you've ever tried, you've ever had, whether you've had a bottle or even sampled. You don't have to say it out loud, but just think of your top 3 whiskeys. I guarantee you one of them was sherry cask.
Well,
go ahead and think about those top 3. But so when I got started, I can remember Macallan 12 was the first sherried whiskey that I just really, it might have been like one of the first sherried whiskeys that I had. And I just, going from, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet's, off the shelf, OBs, all these different whiskeys, scotches you're trying out. And I got a sherry one. And I loved it from the start, from the get-go. So, and I know the argument here is going to be that sherry casking can mask the distillate character.
You think that's the argument?
Well, wasn't it used for that back in
it very well could be. So yeah, I don't now. And few things going through my head here. Got to try to organize them. Organize.
Well, first of all, do you want to just state your stance? I mean, clearly. So, I mean, I think it seems pretty obvious, but
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah. So not overrated.
I love
it. So the question is the sherry cask. Okay. Yeah.
I love it.
Okay. You've got this.
I love them. Thank you. But no, so
you've got like a TikTok filter on your forehead because it looks like.
There we go.
Yeah.
No, I will agree with that though, and that's one of the good things with us, the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, is then you're able to take Glendronach is a very popular OB exclusive sherry maturation, sherry bombs. Do you know what Glendronach distillate is, though, from those bottles? No, you don't. I have one of ours, though. Now I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. One of the Glendronachs, 12 years old, blind. It's not sherry cask. You would never guess, that this is a Glendronach. And the same with the Dalmore. There's a Dalmore that we just released a few months ago. It's in the spicy and dry profile. No sherry influence on it whatsoever. And it's an excellent whiskey. Beautiful, gorgeous whiskey. But I've also had a non-sherry cask Macallan, and it was good. But as I'm drinking it, I'm like, I miss the sherry that Macallan brings, that I expect from Macallan. So, I mean, it's kind of, it is a double-edged sword.
Though.
Do what?
But like, what if you didn't know it was Macallan?
Well, it was still,
you're already biased in your experience tasting that whiskey because you were expecting something. Like, I mean, can you go into that whiskey with, you know what I mean?
True, it was still good, but I still,
yeah.
It was a single cast, say it was 61%. If you take a 61%, that has been sherry cast, I mean, even blind, if I didn't know it was, Macallan, I'm going to probably prefer the sherry cask, or depend on how well it was done.
Yeah.
But so you also have exclusive maturations, you have double maturations with just a finish. And then you've also got blends, that use sherry cast whiskeys and things like that. So
yeah,
that's my Cliff Notes, the get started version. How's that?
Well, Jenna, what was your point about, you were saying about using masking?
Yeah. So I don't know if in Unfiltered for January, they did a really nice kind of dive into the history of like the relationship between sherry and Scotch whiskey. And it kind of, I was reading some things in there and it kind of just sent me down a rabbit hole. And they were saying that like in the late 1870s, when these blended whiskeys were coming about and they had neutral grain spirit in it, and they had to mask that like tarnished flavor of neutral grain spirit. And that is where they would use sherry, sherried whiskeys or sherry cask matured whiskeys. And, they would use that to kind of mask that paint thinner tarnish taste of neutral grain spirit, which I just thought was really interesting. And I don't know if that's like kind of where it began, where people say, oh, these distilleries use sherry to hide things or to, try to fix a boo-boo in a cask or whatever the case is. But yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. First of all, Scott, your question of the top 3 favorite whiskeys. Okay, well, what are yours? You asked the question, what are the top 3? Because that was a really...
All 3 of mine are sherry casked whiskeys.
Okay. What?
But one of them is peated.
Yeah.
Do you want me to name them?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay, I had an old, it was a Gordon MacPhail used to do, well, they probably still do Spey Malt, Spey Malts, which are Macallans. And I had a 38-year-old one, and it was just a gorgeous whiskey. And that was even early on, but I still remember that whiskey. My Tomatin distillery only release Pedro Jimenez, which is depending on the cask, they've had 16 and 18-year-old ones.
Yeah.
The last one was 10 years ex-bourbon, 8 years Pedro Jimenez, and it's just it's a stunner. And then Ardbeg Dark Cove.
Interesting. Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, that's one. Yeah,
I mean, peated, but in sherry.
I think when like whiskey enthusiasm always takes you on an interesting ride. And, I think I'm curious that everybody in chat, like, I'm curious to hear, make sure I'm not the only one here, but when I first started getting into whiskey, I would buy a bunch of bottles, and I spent way too much money buying way too many bottles of whiskey. And then, what happened is like 2 months later, wow, I learned so much more. And I was like still figuring out what I like. And I realized, wow, a lot of these bottles I bought, I don't even like anymore. Like I've moved on. And I think as time goes by, the changing of minds, so to speak, for me didn't happen as frequent as like every month or two. A year would go by, 2 years would go by. I went to Scotland. I would visit some distilleries. I meet other people like in the UK with malt whiskey drinkers there. So like my whole experience kind of went from just me being at home in Chicago at the time, where it's cold as hell and I want something that's going to keep me warm. And the sherry cask style, I mean, the first one I had, I was like, it's not really for me. But then I quickly got into it. Big. And the point about, your favorite whiskeys of all time, it's tough because I think that also depends like where you are with your own experience with whiskey. But mine absolutely wasn't a sherry cask. Now, if I had that whiskey today, this is before I worked for the Scotch Whiskey Society, and like thinking so much has happened since then. But if I had that whiskey today, maybe it wouldn't be my number one. But it was like a 1974 Balvenie, and or like 43-year-olds at the time. I don't remember in a sherry butt. Anyway, it was so. But what was interesting when I joined the Scotch Whiskey Society team, I remember our colleagues in the UK were giving me a hard time because I was like the sherry guy. And
I remember when you were really into sherry, like sherry cask whiskeys.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I was like open about that on Instagram or where somehow somebody knew like, oh, that I like this sherry cask, and they were giving me a hard time about it, and it was like, okay, well, that just makes me like it more, first of all, But what I learned then in spending more time in the UK and getting to know more enthusiasts in the UK who grew up around malt whiskey, not just from the lens of consumer market, the largest consumer market in the world by value, is the love for distillation and the creation of the spirit as both a science and an art form, and everything that goes into whiskey making, and the fact and just that there's more to just tasting the whiskey. It's more than what just a whiskey tastes like. It's what it means, where it comes from, what it represents, and like all the processes that decisions that a distiller will make that impact the outcome in terms of like the flavor, and that how just taking a cask and taking the spirit and putting it in a heavy sherry cask that maybe it may not have been fully rinsed will just mask all of that. You create something that tastes beautiful that I haven't stopped enjoying, but like you can't embrace the spirit that way. You can only embracing the flavor. So I suddenly understood, oh, this is why some of my friends in the UK were saying, no, it's the bourbon cask. I was like, dude, I'm an American. I have enough American milk in my life. It was. So then I'm like, okay, it makes sense. And then I learned more about, the sherry production or the sherry cask production and usage. And I was like, yeah, it is. There are distillers who are maybe taking a lesser approach to things. I don't know, and it's an easier way to make a good impression. So that sounds maybe a little pretentious, but as someone who loves the spirit as an art form, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, do I feel differently? I mean, I'm trying to like debate here, but Scott, your point was very valid. Like, which whiskeys have left the best impression on me? Mm-hmm. And I think, it's not necessarily the one in my glass, which is this bourbon barrel, So I don't know. I'm really kind of conflicted now because you kind of disarmed me at the beginning of this.
I knew it'd get you. Now, just real quick, Jenna, though, yes or no, are any of your top 3 sherry cask whiskeys?
No.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay, what are your top 3?
Are though one of my, and it's funny, like when I think of like my top whiskeys, I think of like moments, right? Like I remember this moment in having this whiskey, and one of them was an Octomore and Reef salts. And I remember tasting that, and it was like I was trying to get into peat from their Micro Provenance series. And I remember I was like still kind of trying to get into peated whiskey, and I tasted that whiskey, and I was like I wanted to cry. I was like, this is the most beautiful thing I have ever tasted in my entire life. It was just the most.
Was it a 0.3?
No,
it was like a 0.4.
Oh.
Or no, it wasn't even it wasn't a bottling. It was right.
No.
It was just like there were just samples.
Oh, gotcha.
And I tasted the same whiskey because they sent me one as well. And I remember you saying this because I was like, this is the most overly aggressive whiskey. Like as a millennial, I'm offended. Like I had some sort of like snobbish opinion of it at the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it's still kind of it's still fortified wine. It's just from France. Not
just real quick for everybody watching, though, if you can comment yes or no, if you're thinking of your top 3 whiskeys you've ever tasted, if there was at least one in there that was sherry finished, sherry matured, or had sherry influence on it, just yes or no.
I'm sure at least there's one. I mean, I'm seeing some comments come through. Sorry, I've been in this, but it's a real okay. But okay, what I was saying about what I was saying. Does that make sense? Do you agree with any of that, or do you see that? I feel like Jenna, you probably relate to that more,
Yeah.
but maybe not.
I mean, I don't think, at least for me, like, do I think that they're overrated? I'm going to say no, because I think that would be a disservice to there's some really beautiful sherry cask matured whiskeys out there. And I think in my life, they served a purpose, because full disclosure, Macallan 18 was what got me here. If I had not tasted that whiskey that night and had that moment of that, holy shit, what is this? Why do I feel this way? This is like, I've never tasted anything like this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this. So I'm incredibly grateful for the sherry cask matured whiskey, because it got me here. I loved Macallan 18 for a very long time. Granted, the one that got me into this was an 80s 18, so a little different, but really beautiful whiskey. And there are still some sherry cask matured whiskeys over my journey that I've really enjoyed, but like over the last, we were just talking that we've all known each other for about 8 years now, and doing this for about 8 years now, just like digging into whiskey and talking about it. My palate has changed so much from where it was 8 years ago. And it's not something that I gravitate toward. It's not something that I find myself, pulling off the shelf very often. Like, of all the bottles behind me, the sherry cask matured ones have the most whiskey in them. It's just not a flavor profile that I really go after. There are some that really do stand out, like Dark Secrets. I think peat and sherry, if I'm going to have a sherry cask matured whiskey, it's got to be peated. Like, that's just for me. I think peat and sherry are just a beautiful marriage. But I'm not going to say they're overrated. And two, like there's so many distilleries out there who have created their legacy on the sherry cask, and I would never want to say, yeah, it's overrated. I would never want to do a disservice or talk down on these distilleries who have worked so hard to create these really beautiful whiskeys. It's just not something for me that I gravitate toward a lot, or would take over an ex-bourbon or a Sautern or, something like that.
The thing is, even, if it's a finish or a longer, if it's a maturation or an exclusive maturation, the notes and stuff that you can bring in there, you can't get from just bourbon casks.
Right.
that really hard, that nice toasted, those almonds and just that heavy nuttiness, those deep, rich, dried fruits, the dirtifs, all of those. Those are notes you can't get from just bourbon casks. So,
but then, like, I just rather have a sherry. Like, I love sherry on its own. I will happily drink. You give me a giant flight of different sherries, I'll happily drink my way through those. I'd rather just have a sherry. There's some whiskeys that I have that have been in sherry cask, and I'm like, where's the whiskey? Like, where is? I want to taste I want to taste like the DNA of that distillery, and it's not in that sherry cask. I want to taste like the malt. I want to taste like the backbone of those whiskeys. And a lot of times in these sherry cask matured whiskeys, it's just like, it's too much for me.
Yeah. And some nights with me, some nights I want, a real heavy sherry bomb where I just want that punch on the palate and all those sweet notes coming through. Sometimes it's just something that's just kind of had a slight maturation in it. Or sometimes even in the blend, with a good sherry, slight sherry notes and stuff in there, and it just makes some beautiful whiskeys.
Like this kind of conversation, this is like a PSA. I think it's important. Maybe this is just blow over. It doesn't matter, but I think it's important to, like, what I was describing about I won't call it an evolution, but just changing of minds over time. It's important. Like, if for anybody in chat watching right now, like, don't let this influence like what you like or don't like, because I think it's important. Like, I think there's a process of exploration that has to happen. And
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, so what you said, Jenna, this brought this to mind when you talk about like the whiskey that's so dark or that asks everything. I was thinking about why it is true that, a lot of people really like the whiskeys that are just dark as night. And there's a certain wow factor with that. If you're not used to that, you're like, wow, look at this whiskey. Color, I think when I got into it and when you're really new to it, it's like, wow, color is like really important. And you can't it's just suddenly just like wake up one day and say, okay, now I'm told the color isn't that important, and like be a snob about it. I don't agree with that. So, but you're right. Your point about drinking sherry, because like we both like sherry a lot, and I've done the dance and gone to southern Spain and drank all the sherry, and I love sherry too. And I think that I really pursued that to better understand the whiskey, but I actually would say that killed the mystery for me, which was part of the sherry cask whiskey experience. I liked these flavors that were a little exotic and incomprehensible and therefore mysterious, because that made the experience of enjoying them that much more magical. But once I started to know, oh, this is Amontillado sherry, that's dry and nutty. Oh, it became like drinking the whiskey became very like technical like it was like a technical analysis of the whiskey. Oh, this flavor comes from this and this flavor comes from that. This, you know what I mean? And so the romance was kind of hindered a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was like recommending everybody goes to drink sherry. Now I'm like, I don't know, just drink what you like.
Yeah, I think like I said, I think that a lot of people get into whiskey through sherry cask, through sherry cask matured whiskey. I think it's kind of like the gateway. It's like a little sweet. It's, some of them are soft, they're approachable, they're, all of these things. And, it's so easy. And I talk about this all the time, like, especially with my husband, when we sit down and have a whiskey, I get really jaded sometimes because we have this, catalog of whiskeys to choose from, and they're all at cask strength. And so, even going back to, let's say, a whiskey at 43%, you're like, wait, where is the rest of it? Like it's really easy for us to do that. And so I try not to be, jaded when it comes to these things. And I think there is a place for sherry cask matured whiskeys. And again, I'm not talking, down on them at all. It's just, it's subjective and it's all personal preference. And I've just learned over the years that it's not a category that I gravitate toward.
Can we go on an ADHD tangent real quick? Because what you just said, I was reading a comment. I'm going to put it up here from Adam Christopher. First world problems, openly admit it. But one of the biggest struggles once you have a diverse, large whiskey collection is what style to have on a given night. Almost impossible. I mean, you just said something. And I was like, I saw this comment and then you said that right after. And I was wondering, I have never talked about this with anybody like before, because I think we talked about this maybe on one live stream. So that let's just shifting gears on that topic. What's your I'm curious for the two of you, first of all. I mean, and everybody in chat, please share your experience. But what's your process for choosing a whiskey when you have hundreds of them to choose from a night? Like walk me through. And I haven't really fully like reviewed my own process in my head before, but.
So 4 out of 5 nights for me, it's Scotch. 1 out of 5 a bourbon.
But does it because like do you say like, okay, I'm thirsty, it's time for a drink, I'm gonna go upstairs or what? I don't know if it's upstairs or downstairs or any stairs, but and it's gonna be Scotch because it's night 4 out of 5, or is it because it's just like that's what you're in the mood for?
I mean, that's what I find myself drinking more often, and that's probably. And so I ask people all the time, what's your favorite, genre of whiskey? Peated scotches, sherried scotches, bourbon, Irish whiskey. What's your favorite genre? Mine is sherried scotches, and probably 3 out of 5 nights I drink a sherried scotch, either one of ours, an SMWS, or an OB, from somewhere. But I just love sherried scotches. So that's it. The fourth night is probably a peated scotch, and the fifth night a bourbon, if that often. So. But it does, and that's what's nice with having that many bottles though too, is you can kind of be like, what am I feeling tonight? And you can kind of go peruse, and you can look like, no, bingo, there it is.
Mine's like very mood driven. Shocking, right? It really just depends on how I'm feeling. For me, Scotch is my first true love. It's what I would have, I would say, 4 out of 5 times. But I really also love Irish whiskey, like a lot. It's very close to my love of Scotch. Bourbon's at the very bottom. And so from time to time, I will have, a bourbon, typically, ones that fall on the more savory kind of earthy side. But it really just depends. Sometimes I'll be talking to members and they'll call and ask about a whiskey, and I'll be rifling through back here and I'll see a bottle and I'm like, oh, I totally forgot I had that. And I'll kind of like put it on my desk, and, then that will kind of be the whiskey that I visit, at the end of the night, or, something like that. But it really just depends on my mood.
Big Dog comments that you don't seem moody at all, Jenna.
I honestly struggle with this. I totally agree that it's a first world problem, so I don't consider it a problem. But I'm like, it's really difficult to figure out. Like, I might decide, I might narrow it down to okay. So I usually think of mood as well. I think of what I'm in the mood for, and I usually start with like it's the style, but more of like no. I would say the first thing is like the experience. Do I want a whiskey that's like thought provoking, and I'm gonna have to like do a whole dance with it because I'm gonna relax, and just me and my dram and my and my guitar or my Xbox or whatever, my taxes. But and then it's like, okay, I'm gonna go. Then I think of like, okay, age, because I think of like, then I'm gonna go with an older whiskey, like something like that's like rare. Treat myself tonight. But then there are other times I'm like, okay, well, I just want something strong and like expressive, So I kind of go there. But man, then there's like so many other like the algorithm continues in so many different directions, because then it's like, okay, so I want something old. Well, then do I want something that's I still think of like, well, how much is left in the bottle? Because I want to be efficient, and I don't want to, if I love something so much, do I drink it or do I let it stay alive? I don't know. And anyway, sometimes I'm just like, I'm gonna pour a tequila because I can't choose. It's crazy. So I'm just admitting that it's like, it's sometimes difficult, or I'll pour something and then I'll realize I can't just do one. I have to do two, sorry, I'm going a long story, but I'm curious to know, because it's something I've been struggling so hard. I just choose what whiskey to pour at night.
That is true for me though too. Some nights I just don't feel. Some nights you kind of feel like sitting down and examining and really enjoying a whiskey, and some nights you just want to tune out and just have a whiskey of any kind in your hand. And that's usually one of those 40-45 percenters, off the shelf OBs, and
yeah. So I just poured something for you, Scott, and all the sherry heads out there. I'm just kidding. 78.41, a real sherry monster.
Ooh.
We released this as like my first year working with the company. It was like 2018. 19-year-old from a refill ex Oloroso sherry butt. Man, 19 years old, distilled 1997. So yeah, about a while ago. Anyway, I've been nursing this bottle. There's like a quarter left, but there's been a quarter left for 4 years. So it's probably super oxidized. Yeah.
Last cask we had from them too.
Are there bottles that like you remember loving so much years ago, like in the beginning of your exploration, that you go back for now, like hoping to have that same experience with, and you're disappointed?
Totally.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there are whiskeys that, early on I defined as my favorite whiskeys, and I refuse. And once I call them that, I don't know, like there was just confirmation bias at play every time I would drink it again. But I'm like, Is that your experience as well?
Yeah. Like I remember Highland Park 15 was like my, like, if I had to pick one whiskey to just take with me forever, it was that. But, this was also like 7 years ago. And when they re-released it into that fancy bottle and stuff now, I just please be close. Just let me have this moment. It's gone. And I just didn't. And obviously the whiskey's a little different, but I was hopeful that I would have, like, I don't know, just like a glimmer of those feelings. And I didn't. So yeah, it's hard. But I also kind of look at it too in a way that it's like, it was special then, right? It was a moment, it was a memory. It kind of cements that time in my journey. And I'm sure I'll have, many bottles now and in the future that do the same.
Does your bottle have a necklace on it, Jenna?
Oh yes, it has a Scotch for Dummies necklace on it.
Oh yeah, I have one of those.
Yeah.
Drew, if you're still in the shout out.
I had this for so long, and it just moves from like bottle to bottle. And
I know
my Selkies, Kelpies, and Pete Reek.
It's such a random. I got one. It's in the cabinet, but I was like, it's such a random thing, and like I would never throw it away, ever. So it's like gonna live forever on one bottle of many, and it like yeah, it's great. It's great. It's like a character in my collection. It's so funny. Yeah. Anyway, shout out Scotch for Dummies, not to be confused with the Scotch Test Dummies, but they did beat them in the blind shootout of 2019. Or what was that? 2019? It was 2019, I think, maybe. Yeah,
that was 2020, actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was 2020.
Then I got COVID, the original. I guess the C word right after that.
Oh, right.
The C who should not be named. Yeah.
Especially on YouTube.
Yeah. Let's shift to our the second topic. I mean, we've already ended up 45 minutes just talking about sherry and necklaces, but
we can still we could still go on sherry because we didn't even really get into like the sherry seasoning of casks and the old
okay,
doing
that's a good idea.
No, we can come back. We can save that.
No. Let's I mean, we're on the topic. Yeah, I was wanting to talk about that too. What do you want to share?
Well, and I can remember several years ago, a big topic of discussion was at the time was Macallan using sherry seasoned casks and how that was, this atrocity. Well, come to find out, 95%, 98% of sherry casks that are used out there are just seasoned sherry casks. Yeah. They don't do it like they used to, where sherry was stored in them and transported and held for longer periods of time. So, the majority of your sherry casks out there being used, sherry whiskeys, are from just, sherry seasoned casks. It's not that big of a shocker.
Yeah. I've learned this. And now again, I'm take what I say with a grain of salt too, because I've never bought a cask from a bodega in Spain, but I've spent a lot of time talking with you and Campbell, their spirits manager, who does that often, and he really educated me on just this topic. And it's funny because I had spent years online on social media in the forums, listening to people complain about the sherry season. It's not really matured. It's seasoned for 2 years with like the wine aged for 2. So yeah, what I learned was that sherry production is not nearly the standard of like the quality control is not nearly the level of like what Scotch whiskey production quality control is. And the casks are wildly unpredictable. So like when you go buy real casks, like not everyone's going to be a winner, but when you're actually assembling a cask and then seasoning it for a controlled amount of time, the whole process of creation is it's just at such a higher standard that it's more consistent and more predictable, and just overall it's engineered to produce a better outcome than the off the wall sherry cask. So my own conclusion, and this is the great conversation because I'm curious to hear what you think and then what everybody else in chat thinks too, because my conclusion is that, when it comes to comprehending distillation, I'm no expert, at all. But for most of us, like what do we comprehend? Like the fact that cask has influences flavor. Like that's an easier concept within distillation production to understand. So when I would always see people rant about, the Macallan, for instance, doesn't do it the way they used to. There were so many variables in the production process that have changed over the decades beyond the sherry cask. Like there's so many factors that impact flavor that everyone just says it's because they season sherry casks. When I think you look at the time, and I like researched the timeline on this thing, like when did they start doing it? Oh, like a long time ago. So like, people were saying like this whiskey was better than this one. Then I'll say, wait, both of those whiskeys were used made with the same types of cask. Anyway, So I learned that it's like the highest quality casks for Scotch whiskey maturation are the ones that have been seasoned, generally speaking. And the ones, and 95+% of sherry casks from European oak are seasoned, because mostly sherry is not made in European oak. It's too tannic for sherry wine. It's American. They use American oak. So
yeah.
All right, that's my.
But I think it was 1980. Some stuff that I had read. I think it was 1981 was when they had the sherry industry had they changed the regulations, because before that they were using casks to transport sherry across the world to their final destinations. And then in 1981 was when the sherry industry said, kind of like Scotch, it has to be bottled in Spain as well, or you can't call it sherry. So they quit using the transport casks because sherry had to be bottled in Spain.
Yeah, imagine that.
And I had another point I was going to from that, and I forget now what it was.
Sorry, I just went on a monologue. I've been wanting to say that publicly for like 5 years. Oh, so good. I can tell, Jenna, you have no opinion. I don't care if it's seasoned or true intent.
I mean, I really don't, to be honest. Does it make a great whiskey?
Mm-hmm.
Then, all right.
Yeah.
I think it's one thing if like distilleries lie about it, then okay. Like, but if you're transparent with it and it makes a great whiskey, then
there and supposedly too, pretty soon they're supposed to be changing it even again, making it tighten it a little bit tighter. Spain is. There's some pretty loose regulations about people putting on a label like sherry matured, or labeling casks sherry that weren't sherried. And so pretty soon, if it hasn't already gone into effect, some of those Spain's going to be putting some more restrictions and tighter controls on being able to call something sherry or sherry matured if it wasn't actually sherry casks from Spain.
From a bodega.
Basically.
Yeah. But aren't, right. But the production of the casks is done in Spain, and then the sherry that's used to be seasoning is made in Spain.
But I think there's some distilleries that are labeling stuff sherry casks that aren't.
Oh,
so there's kind of a loose. There's not too much controls or oversight on that. Right
now.
Now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Who the hell is doing that? They're just. I
remember reading about that.
Really?
Yeah, like it was like the fall of last year, I think is when I was reading about that. But I've not taken the liberty to dive deeper into that.
That's interesting that sherry is like a selling point now, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that someone would go the great lengths of like faking it. Wow. Look at this sherry cask. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think in like Mizunara oak, you know, like everybody, there was that craze that everybody was like, Mizunara. Oh, I would love to talk about Mizunara, but it's like, yeah, people, you know.
I was going to say another one. So yeah, the Mizunara, which is good, but there's also another, I've had a couple bottles recently of Amburana oak, which is from Africa.
Oh, interesting.
And it is very unique.
Really?
It makes some good whiskey.
What would you compare it to? Like, what's the?
It's a very heavy sandalwood, almost. I mean, it's an amplified Mizunara. Really, I mean, it's gorgeous. It's good. Yeah.
I love like the mental picture that this paints. This African one. I mean, I love. Okay, we're talking about like I like playing guitars, and like some of the coolest woods are all African woods. I mean, ebony is like so popular, but so I love this idea of like this. The flavors that can come. Mizunara is like
Brazil. Mike B says Brazil. Yeah.
Brazil. Oh, Ebony's from Brazil, or what's from Brazil?
Amburana oak.
Amburana. Okay. Well, still cool.
Yeah, I think it's exciting to see all of these kind of new things come to light too. Like, I'm so down to try anything when it comes to whiskey.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if it's like bathtub whiskey, maybe I'll skip that, but for the most part, like, I really am down to try anything. I want to taste it first, like, and I think that's what like the key thing that I've learned in being here at the society is that, and we can kind of get into this when we talk about single cask, is, you know, to really just kind of taste the whiskey first. Do you enjoy it? Okay, great. Now, where does it come from? What type of cask was it in? You know, was it in? How old is it? All of that stuff kind of can come secondary. And it's really hard to kind of have that moment all the time, you know, when you know what's in your collection, you know what you're going to pick up off the shelf. But I think it's exciting to see all of these new whiskeys kind of come to light.
I just took a sip of this real sherry monster 78.41. I'm like, good Lord, like this is I don't know. I feel like there's like this gospel coming out of me with this which I have none of my blood. I just like, it's like, you know, I don't know. I'm 3 hours away in Memphis and just like going hallelujah. Like this is amazing. It's so good right now. It's so good. Yeah. Still adjusting to my Tennessee environment that I absolutely love. So Scott, I don't want to get off of your sherry topic. I try to deviate and then you're like, come back home. So should we move on to this thing? What's it coming? Big Dog says sandalwood takes me back to the shop where I once bought incense in Louisville. Electric
Landlady.
Is that like Electric Ladyland, like the Hendrix Electric, like the album? Or is that just the name of the incense?
By incense, do you mean weed, Big Dog?
Top.
Okay, yeah. I
Asking
love
for a friend.
Sandalwood is great. Yeah. JT says, when I see a whiskey stating finished in a sherry cask, I get very curious as to how it impacts that specific distillery or what that distillery can do with it, if that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Our whiskeys, for instance, it used to be finishes was a year, and now we've left some of these in the warehouse for a long time. And you know, we're 3, 4, 5 year finishes. It doesn't even finish. That's like half the term, or more than half at times. So it changes that what the distillery can do, but yeah, totally. Let's talk about the single cask, because we promised it, and we also promised that we would do this all in an hour, and we're at an hour. So let's this is the topic I wanted to bring up, because we're in a unique position. We're surrounded by single cask whiskeys, but we're also increasingly surrounded by other types of whiskeys, because the society has gone full-blown flavor exploration. And that was really always the intent. Well, it has been for years. It's just taken years to build up to this. The idea of, you know, let's create as many unique things with as many variables as possible. Because like in our warehouse, for instance, in Scotland, we've got thousands and thousands of casks from all different distilleries. There is no warehouse in Scotland like that, because most of them are housing spirit from one distillery or a few, not from 100 plus, you know. So the idea was that, okay, we can bottle them all, and did that for a few decades. And then it became kind of, I think, boring is what I was told. It's like, you know, imagine going to work and like, let's bottle another one of this, another one of that. And I appreciate that for anybody who's new to the society or new to whiskey, it's new to you, so you haven't been there. But I think the dream was always to, now let's kind of just get a little creative and acquire wood. And so, but this begs the question, you know, what's your stance on the single cask? Like where does it sit in your whiskey heart? Truly, you know, because we're not in this like fight here for single cask versus others, but what's your current state of interest for the single cask?
I mean, I really love a single cask, and I love it for a couple of different reasons. One, I always kind of like to think of these as like a little whiskey snapshot, right? Like you're capturing a moment. Like the second it gets bottled, you're just capturing that moment. Maybe the flavor would change if you waited a day or a week or, you know, another month. Like what would that whiskey be? Like you're literally just capturing this moment. And I also like it because you have so many different opportunities to experience a whiskey in so many different ways, right? You're getting this like most concentrated whiskey And maybe one night you want to have it neat and experience it in that way. And it will change, it will change once it's been opened and how long you leave it open. Like I have so many whiskeys who are, that like the evolution of flavor has, been a joy to really taste through. And then maybe some days you want to add 1 drop of water and it's a different whiskey, 2 drops of water, it's a different whiskey. You want to make a cocktail with it, it's a different whiskey. Like you just have so many opportunities to taste these whiskeys in so many different ways. And I really love that about it. And I love that it's this thing that like reminds you to like chill out, take a minute and like really like be intentional with what you're drinking, right? These aren't whiskeys that you're going to be able to finish and just go to the store and pick up again, like it's a one and done kind of thing. And so it's like every time I have one of these whiskeys, I really try to just like take a minute, pause, and be intentional with how I'm enjoying this whiskey. And I think that's the beauty of a single cask is it really just kind of reminds you to kind of push the pause button. And those are just a few of the reasons why I love them. Are they all I drink? No. Are there other whiskeys that the whiskeys that I love, like genuinely love, are not, in single cask form? I love a lot of cask strength whiskeys. I love whiskeys that, sit at 50% ABV, some, even less. But I think that there is a real magic about a single cask. And that's not me just like blowing smoke up your butts, because I work here and I talk about this stuff. This is in being here and being a part of the society. It's like gifted me that like perspective, on whiskey. And I think that's just a couple of reasons why single cask are quite special.
What's your hot take?
I think so. I think that everybody starts, not everybody, probably 95% of people start with, low ABVs. They're starting with the 40 percenters, the 45 percenters off the shelves. And as they go through, sometimes it could be a short, 1-2 year, time period. Maybe it's longer. It took me a while to get past I can remember when I first started drinking whiskey, and like a 45% whiskey I thought was really strong. You were used to buying 40 percenters and 43 percenters, and then you get something like 46, maybe 50%, and just blew your palate out of the water. It was so strong. And so it's kind of one of those things that you kind of warm up to, you get used to them. And then as you get into whiskey and you really start that exploration, or you want to see what else is out there, and you get into single casks. And again, ours are they're just phenomenal bottles. They are the WSs. They're hard to beat. And having that unwatered down, spirit that's presented at cask strength, and that single cask that hasn't been blended with other whiskeys is just, it's taught me though too, because I used to keep bottles around. Like I need to save that one for a comparison, or I need to keep some of that one because it was so good. I've learned with our bottles, hey, enjoy it, drink it, and when it's gone, it's gone. And there's going to be another great cask coming down the line, so it's just one of those, kind of taught me to appreciate it a little bit more and say goodbye and move on, And
I think too, what's really cool about what we do is like, we're able to get these casks from distilleries that never release single malt of their own. Right. And I talk about this a lot, like, let's just take Johnny Walker, for example, and to be able to break that down, right, into single cask form, and to like kind of go on that journey of tasting those distilleries, like without water, without chill filtration, or, chill filtration, without E150, like just pure raw, like unadulterated spirit. Right. And to be able to kind of break those things down, I think is a really awesome, opportunity and experience. And I think too, it's like, I want to say it's made me appreciate other whiskeys even more, being able to experience whiskey in this way, like I love blending.
How so?
Like, I don't know. It's like just the way that I sit with the whiskey, right? The way I nose a whiskey, the way I taste a whiskey. Like, I don't know. I think in my journey in single cask whiskey has really taught me to like not just do that for single cask whiskey, but to do that for every whiskey.
Mm.
You know? And so like now when I sit down and have like a Johnny Walker, you know, black or the high rye, I can like really sit there and be like, am I getting the Kleinlich? Am I like, where is that Kalila at? Like, am I getting all of those things and being able to really like take a minute with those whiskeys that are just whiskeys that I can pick up, you know, all the time, anywhere in the world. I think it's just given me a different level of appreciation for all whiskey. You know, in navigating whiskey via a single cask.
Yeah, it's, you know, Scott, your question, when we were talking about the sherry cask and your question about your top 3 favorite whiskeys, really, I think has shifted my perspective on a lot of these things, because I'm applying that now to this as well. And, you know, I think I've seen people over the years, you know, say like most of this is online, so I don't know that online is like an accurate representation of reality all the time, as much as like some people think it is. But people were saying, you know, it's like it's only single cask or die kind of thing, and I was like, well, that's interesting, because you know, that's from a business standpoint, I'd like you to say that. Sure, that's great, but at the same time, like, well, you know, all the time, because I feel like there's a time and place for all different types of whiskey. Like there's a role to play for everything. And so, I mean, to counter, I would say from a flavor standpoint, which is like a lot of what we're doing now, is, you know, there's a synergy to be had by adding more ingredients to a recipe. You know what I mean? Or rather, you know, a blended whiskey or a single malt, a blend of multiple casks can effectively be greater than the sum of its parts. You know, you can create a real experience that way that can't be had, but it's immediately devoid of another experience, was generally exactly what you described, you know, which is now it's well, in the single cask form, it's picking out the different elements, the water, the grain, like the individual staves of like one barrel of millions in you know, in a nation. I don't know. But their question, Scott, about what was your favorite whiskeys of all time are interesting, because I was ready to make a case not against single cask whiskey, because it's most of what I drink, but just like to share other perspectives. And all 3 of mine are single cask whiskeys. and I think it's also because I really didn't want this to be. I didn't know that the 3 of us would be like so gung ho about it. I mean, I guess I should expect that out of us, like that it's kind of like, I'm glad we're still into it, but so I was coming prepared to like make some counter arguments just for the sake of conversation. But my best whiskey experience has still been tasting whiskey like in a warehouse somewhere, if I get to do that. And I don't think it's really hard to match that for me. Mm-hmm. And that's totally like changed my mind about certain styles, even if I've had like amazing cask and an amazing moment somewhere. But tasting a whiskey that you know is like in a cask that's just aging and will not taste the same tomorrow. I mean, technically in one day it's not going to change much in the course of, you know what I mean? But theoretically, like it's constantly changing in a constant state of change. Like that is such a cool thing, isn't it? I don't know. And every single cask whiskey here, like I just poured one now, it's like a snapshot of a certain time and place, and it will never be there. I don't know. So there's a real romance there that I fall for. I'm a romantic guy, so like you know, so it went for me. Not every time, but like, you know, yeah. So.
And I feel like too, like having whiskeys in this way, and having again like the catalog of whiskeys that were, you know, that are available to us. This has encouraged me to go out and try whiskeys that I don't think I would have otherwise. Like I've learned so much about distilleries that I've totally fallen in love with here, that I've gone out of, you know, even outside of work, and hunted their whiskeys down because I have to taste it now. You know, like I've had this experience, and like I want to kind of follow the you know, the trail of crumbs to, you know, go back and actually taste what it is that they do. And I think that's a really cool thing too. There's just so many, I think, awesome things about exploring whiskey in this way. And, you know, Scott made a good point. Like everybody's kind of journey is different, kind of when you get to this point, right? You know, maybe it is a year into your journey, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 20 years. Don't put pressure on yourself to, even if you're not a fan of single cask whiskey, to get there. You will get there at some point. Just take your time and enjoy your whiskeys along the way, and don't put pressure on yourself to, feel like you have to enjoy whiskey in this way. But I've learned so much about the world of whiskey through these casks, and it's a really cool thing.
Okay, roll the clocks back a few years, and then it was probably okay. When did you really get serious about whiskey? What year?
Wait, you're muffled. What did you say?
Yeah, you really got muffled.
Am I muffled now?
Oh, there we go. No, because when you grabbed the stand,
Let's go, baby.
it like muffled you.
LFG. That's for you, big dog. So, what year was it that you're like, okay, I'm getting serious about this thing, whiskey?
I mean, 2015 is when I started Whiskey A Go Girl, because I was like, I got to know more about the stuff, and Instagram had this amazing community of people who were sharing things, and I don't know what I would have done without that community. They answered so many questions for me, and I got to meet you guys, and look, here we are today. So I would say, like 2015 is when I really started getting serious about it.
Within that first year, once you started getting day one of I'm serious about it now.
Yeah.
After 12 months, what was your favorite whiskey you had that 12 months?
Jeez, I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah. I'm just curious. This is like totally off topic, but
yeah, that's I don't know.
I remember Scott. Well, I remember an early Scotch Test Dummy video when we did the Johnny Walker Blue Label review, and you're like, "This is my Christmas bottle every year," right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the case for a lot of people, by the way. Like, Blue Label, I mean, it's obviously just everywhere. I was just curious.
When you're getting into whiskey, though, and you're newer, I mean, there's that aura. I mean, it's the Levi jeans. I mean, when someone that doesn't know anything about jeans, they've heard of Levi jeans.
Yeah.
Someone that's getting into Scotch, they've heard of Johnny Walker, and then they've heard of
my Levi jeans. Dude. What's wrong with my Levi jeans?
No, I'm just saying, as far as how does a new guy get into Johnny Walker Blue Label? I think it's just because people know for jeans. People know Levi's is a jeans. When people get into Scotch, they know Johnny Walker is a Scotch.
Yeah.
And then the good Johnny Walker, is Blue Label. Well, that's a $200 bottle.
Yeah.
It's got to be good.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was several years. That was my Christmas bottle. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Instant. I mean, because that's there's obviously something for recognition. Now, like these bottles that we have here, like these look, I know every time someone sees these, like they're like, what is this? Like, whoa, this is super fancy, but it doesn't have the, ooh, wow, I feel like a baller, like, because people will recognize me, and Blue Label, I feel like has that. Like if you can post a picture on Instagram, you're gonna get a lot of likes from people that don't know you, just because that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But was that your favorite whiskey in the first, like when you started getting serious?
No, actually,
whiskey. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if there was anything really. I mean, we did that Macallan 12, but I'm trying to remember if that was still my favorite at the time, or if something was before that was my favorite. But I think that really kind of was the first one that I really fell in love with and took off with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking back.
You're looking at notes of some
Jesus
sort?
Christ.
Oh my God.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Oh, you're looking at Instagram. Oh, I realized I used to keep an ongoing note on the notes app of every whiskey I tasted and
oh my gosh,
a rating for everything. Oh my, I gave up.
I have like physical notebooks like that I've written notes in that are all
really?
Favorites, but apparently I really love Talisker Storm, which honestly, if I had it on my shelf, I would happily drink that. Really like.
I would love to try that again. I haven't. It's been Then wasn't there Dark Storm and then like an other like a really dark storm or something like that? I had that one.
I just remember Storm and Dark Storm was the international.
They just constantly rechar the old casks and make them darker.
I liked the Glenlivet French Oak, the 15-year.
Oh,
Apparently, I really liked
Yeah.
that at the time. But yeah, it looks like Talisker Storm was my
yeah.
year in number
Yeah,
one.
yeah. That's funny. I think the first whiskey, the one I was like, this is the best whiskey I've ever had, like, was this Bruichladdich Black Art High Noon, which was a 500 ml
Wow.
bottle from the Feshiel of 2014 or 15.
Jeez.
And I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing I can. I can go back on Instagram. But then shortly after, I had the Kilhoman port cask. It was a 3-year-old at 55%. And I've revisited that whiskey since. I'm like, okay, now it to me, it's not the same, but it's still really, really good, you know. And
They're fantastic, though.
yeah, Talisker, man, I would love to see some single casks. Of course, they don't sell them. I mean, they're hard. There's some out there, but I would love to get a young.
Yeah.
I've tasted a few over many years. It's been a while. They're so hard to get. Like I've had like a 5-year-old Talisker. Picked up in Edinburgh. I was like, this is just like should be illegal. It was wild. That was so much fun. Yeah, it's good to think back on these things that, you know, man, just makes me feel like I'm getting old.
I went back to my early reviews with Bart back in we started in 2013. We reviewed Talisker Storm April of 2014.
Yeah.
Oh, that's almost 10 years ago, almost 9 years, but yeah, not
So
before
crazy.
ago.
Martin Fielder says, my first knock my socks off was Octomore 6.1. Oh, that was the first Octomore bottle I bought, 6.1. I'm curious, everybody in chat, what was your first knock my socks off? What was the first whiskey that knocked your socks off? Because it doesn't, I mean, favorite says it has to be over a period of time, or what was the first whiskey that knocked your socks off?
It might have been that 38-year-old Macallan Gordon and MacPhail Bay Malt, honestly. That I was just like, holy shit.
Were you already really into whiskey at that time, though?
That was probably, I mean, for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was probably 2015, 2016, somewhere in there.
What's the whiskey that got you into whiskey, though? Because truly that had
Black Label, Johnny Walker Black Label.
So that had to knock your socks off, no? Or no, it doesn't?
Well, I mean, first, did it knock my socks off? No. Was it better than I had expected? You know, for those that don't know the story, my ex at the time was on a girls' cruise, and she thought I drank scotch, and so she brought me home a big bottle of Johnny Walker Black because it was cheap on the ship. And I said, I don't drink scotch. And she was like, you don't? And I was like, no, when have you ever seen me sitting around sipping on whiskey? I go, from what I hear, it's kind of nasty stuff, you know? But I was like, well, since she bought it for me, I'll
Wait, were you married at the time? Did she know you?
Yeah.
She just like got it wrong? Like,
yeah, just got it wrong. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and so, you know, it was like this much Johnny Walker Black and this much ice and water. And I tried it and I was like, you know, honestly, that's not too bad. And over time, it's just the water and the ice started coming down, and got down to drinking it neat and really enjoying it, and branched out to Glenlivet 12 and Glenfiddich 12. Actually did Johnny Walker Red for a while because it was cheaper, but that didn't last long. Went back to Johnny Walker Black. But yeah, and then of course you're back in 2007, probably when that happened, when I started. Yeah. So 16 years ago.
That's like now for the whiskeys that were distilled that year, like really solid. I mean, I'm just talking for context. I put everything in perspective of what would the whiskey taste like if it were aged from that moment. Yeah.
There's some really good answers. There's a Brora 30. Mike B said a Brora 30.
Brora 30 Diageo third release. I think that's the one that we had in Indy, right, Scott? The Diageo third release, the Brora with, or was that not? Okay, I don't know.
No, there was a Brora.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was in the one tasting, right?
Yeah, it was was anybody, if you guys follow the Scotch 4 Dummies, I went to their anniversary party in Indianapolis, 5-year anniversary party. It was 6 year, I think, because COVID happened.
Yeah.
There was a tasting, and there was a Brora in the tasting, and I remember in the what's the app, the Discord, big debate of our big people were really freaking out because there was a Ardbeg Ugadal in the lineup before the Brora, and everyone's freaking out. I'm not gonna be able to taste the Brora. Like if you pour it after the Ardbeg, I don't know, man. I tasted every drop of that Brora. It worked somehow. It was amazing.
Yeah,
I thought
that was at the dinner. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah, Matt says Matt cask strength. Yeah, I remember when that was really cheap. Like that was like $60 or something. I still have a couple bottles from paying that amount at the time. It was like an auction, so this is crazy.
So in 2017 they released the classic cut, kind of getting back to that. Now 2017 was pretty decent. The latest one, and they've been getting weaker and weaker. The latest one is probably 90% ex-bourbon casks and 10% sherry. And it's a completely different Macallan that you expect out of the classic cut line.
Interesting. I mean, we can do like a whole stream talking about Macallan. It's Macallan's like first of all, we've been getting Macallan like lately, which has been like amazing. Oh, I just also want to just share my opinion about Macallan. Is I have a bourbon. Well, there's one from a bourbon cask here. It's incredible. Like it's 18 years old, and I am like enamored by it. So I hear your point, Scott. Totally. Macallan was influential to me in my own interest in whiskey at a young age, for sure. And this is going to sound so basic, but like I also grew up reading Ian Fleming novels, and by Ian Fleming I mean James Bond, and like that association has got to have paid off big time for Macallan because I thought it was like the coolest thing, and then I found out that it's a really popular brand. Like I had no idea because it just seemed like it was like this like small little secretive thing. I was living under a rock, but yeah. So a lot of comments about Pete and Johnny Walker Green. Oh, that's the enthusiast one, the green label, the 100% malt. But JT Balcones Brimstone. Have you guys had that?
Yeah.
That one is incredible. I mean, that's so funny. I remember. Yeah.
It's got a lot of flavor. Yeah.
Their pilgrimage in Sauterne is amazing.
The pilgrimage in Sauterne. Okay. That's just a funny color. I remember tasting this like at a whiskey festival, probably 2016-ish or something like that, and thinking like, what the hell is this? This is so different, and it was my first time trying Balcones, and it was this one, and I was like, this is what Texas whiskey should be like. I think, anyway.
The Brimstone is the only Balcones I've had that I did not care for.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's certainly like a thing. I don't think it's created to be the most sophisticated balanced whiskey, right? I mean, it's like
it tasted like sagebrush, just like a burning pile of sagebrush that you swallowed.
Yeah. I think it was hickory smoked, Mike BS.
Yeah,
I think that's what it was. Anyway, I thought it was cool. I was like, I love Texas. My wife is from Texas, so I was like, I don't even know how to, do rodeo. But so I've always had this. It's always appealed to me as just as a city boy. So when I tasted that whiskey, I was like, wow, this is like what I think the culture of Texas it should be like. Anyway, okay, well. We can go on and on and on and on. Quick question for everybody. I think we should probably call it soon. We've gone over our sort of hour threshold that we had in our minds. So we want to continue these conversations. We're going to do more topics. We're to bring on guests. We're to go like real deep in some of these things. I think we got a little deep with the sherry thing. I mean, maybe we just do one topic, and because I feel like we can cruise through an hour even, and or maybe we have two and maybe we don't get to two, but Question just for everybody in chat real quick. What do you want to talk about next? We plan on doing these at least once a month. So it's really up to you. Take a moment real quick and think about what is it. And you can also just drop a comment after the video is posted as a replay. But think about what you'd like us to address. What are some questions you have about whiskey? Some things that you've heard or learned about and thought, it doesn't seem right. Maybe there's some debunking to be had. Matt says Society Sundays.
That's a great idea.
That's a great idea for the ones who don't have little ones. So Scott, you guys will see Scott every Sunday, and then he'll go to work on Monday. And
yeah.
Dale says, "I love Pete." I knew it.
That's on the list already.
I told you. Oh, and unpeated Isla as well. So basically, he wants to talk about Isla. I knew we'd have one. Whiskey Franco says, "I'd love to have a focus on whiskeys that defy the SM." Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's I like that topic. That's like oh man, we can go real nerdy in this thing. I think this is the place for it. Okay. Love the format trends, like whiskey trends.
Yeah. I would point out that when I asked everybody to reply either yes or no when they thought of their 3 best whiskeys they've ever had, and if any of them were sherry influenced, everybody that replied said yes. There wasn't a no in there.
You're still having the debate that wasn't even had?
Yeah.
Oh. You guguys know that I once went head-to-head against Scott in a blind taste challenge? That's so
last year.
I thought it was it last year or 2 years ago?
I think it was just last year. It was like last spring.
Last year?
Yeah.
Last year.
It was last year? Okay. I just want to remind everybody. Yeah. I did win by a full half of a point.
Might be time to
notice
do that.
How I haven't brought up the idea of a rematch because I've been waiting for you to propose it because yeah.
Maybe we could do that on one of these Whiskey Wednesdays.
Okay. Next month I want to about Ben's FM DJ voice. Kiss FM 97.9. How I can learn to acquire it. Well, 1, you can get COVID and or some sort of like laryngitis. I don't know what I have right now. 2, you can buy this microphone on Amazon and then just get really close to it and talk deeply. Thank you, big dog. LFG. Taylor says the regional spotlights. Matt says terroir. Isn't that the French word terroir?
Terroir.
Jen says Scott just likes to talk about sherry cask. Taylor says Scott and his sherry cask. I think though it's the microphone he uses. Take it away, and he likely Jesus, the microphone. I'm actually. This is like my Darth Vader mask. New flavor profiles, like new ones. Okay. Regional spotlights and characteristics. Okay, so the regional love is still there.
Yeah.
This is all helpful. We're gonna go review all these again after posting this video and take some notes. But we definitely have some guests lined up and some great ideas we want to talk about, and maybe we'll dedicate more time to one topic as opposed to trying to squeeze in 2.
I think next month we could just do Oloroso casks.
And then the next month PX casks.
And then whiskeys that are in both PX and Oloroso.
Oh, bingo.
Okay. In Scott's dreams. Okay. All right. More Scott and Dirtus. All right. I'm gonna no more sherry talk. No more sherry talk. This is the last we're done. All right. Good night, all. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your Whiskey Wednesday. Pour a bourbon cask matured malt or 2, and enjoy the pure, clean flavor and lovely floral, fruity distillate that is on offer, devoid of any dark sherry cask.
Sweet, pruny, biggie.
Or just find something in Fino. So anyway,
So,
all right. Night, guys. Cheers.
all right, cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.